but we'll be good. All right, you guys, welcome to Discover Your Dosha. I am so excited you are all here. Whether you know the doshas and just want a refresher, or this is new to you, I think that there will be something for you to take away. So please, if you have any questions, jot down your questions. Like I said, we'll do a question and answer at the end, and I want to hear from you. Like, I want to hear what's bubbling up. I want to hear what you're thinking, and what you think your dosha may be after this webinar. And for all of you who are listening to the recording after the fact, you can always pop in the comments any questions or any aha moments, and I will be sure to respond. I love to hear from you. So here we go. Ayurveda is the science of life. So Ayur means science and Veda means life. Ayurveda gives us a framework to better understand ourselves. It's like a user manual for your body once we start to dig in. And the doshas are kind of like the chapters, so we kind of know how to go to each chapter and how to take it. So again, I'm hearing a little bit of background noise. If you're not muted, if you could please mute yourself, and let me see if I can figure out how to mute you guys, but I don't. Oh, here we go. Mute all. All righty. Figured it out. Okay. So as we go through this, please just have an open mind and get curious. If you've done a dosha quiz in the past, especially one online, have an open mind about that too. I often have people who come to my coaching that have taken dosha quizzes and it doesn't resonate for them. They're like, this doesn't make any sense for me. And the online algorithm doesn't understand and isn't picking up on the same nuances that a human is picking up on. So just have a totally open mind. Know that our doshas are also fluctuating, which we're going to talk about. And hopefully you'll learn something new about yourself today. You're in the right place if you're a human. I wish that every single human could learn about the doshas, because it's just an empowering way to start to understand our body and to start to understand the way that we work in the world around us. This is amazing if you're interested in optimizing your health. Learning the doshas and learning how to prevent imbalances is going to prevent, hopefully, the onset of chronic diseases. So this is the place to be. It's also really amazing if you want to support your family and friends in living healthier lives. Now that I understand the doshas, I can see a bit of the doshas in the people around me, and then I can offer little bits of insight based on that. The doshas are really amazing to look at too if you're experiencing digestive issues. So Ayurveda sees that the digestion is the root of almost all illnesses and imbalances. So digestion is always the first thing that we work on balancing when we're approaching something Ayurvedically. So we are going to talk about digestion today. You might get some ideas for your own digestive issues. It's also amazing if you're experiencing hormone imbalances. We need to bring our body back into balance for the hormones to come into balance. And this is a big one, if you're ready to ditch fat diets. So I'm a child of the 80s and the 90s. I have literally tried all of the diets out there. I remember being in high school and thinking I couldn't eat carbs, and then being scared of fats, and then being a vegan, and then being raw, and then being paleo, and all of the things. And once I finally found Ayurveda, I was able to let go of all of those restrictions and actually figure out what feels good for me and what my body needs. And the amazing thing is that my body needs different things at different times of the year, or different things based on like different energy that I'm exerting. And so I don't have any restrictive diet rules around me. I'm just constantly evolving. And that's what I wish for all of you. So hopefully at least one of these is like, yes, I am in the right place. So in this masterclass, we're going to learn what exactly the three doshas are: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. We're going to go deep into each of them, how to recognize the doshas in your body and in the world around you. So the doshas are present in the seasons, as well as the times of day, as well as our age. And so we're going to start to be able to look at all of that. And then I'm going to give you top strategies for keeping these doshas in balance so that you can walk away with some really tangible tips on how to start to keep your body in balance, how to optimize your own health. All right, in case we haven't met, my name is Lillian. This is my dog, Mac. He's a big part of my life. I'm an Ayurvedic health coach and I'm a hormone health coach. So I love working with women and men, but especially I love to work with women on balancing their hormones and really bringing things back into place. Because once we can bring that into place, it seems like everything else starts to fall together. I live in Los Angeles. I love living in Los Angeles. We have year-round farmers markets and lots of sunshine. But I've lived all over the country. Have many people in my community. Many of you who are probably watching this masterclass that I met when I was living on the East Coast. I work with individuals both in person and virtually. I lead one-on-one coaching and group coaching programs. Empowering you to understand Ayurveda so that you can live a healthier life and you can look to yourself for the answers on how to live that healthier life and how to keep your body healthy is what lights me up. That's why I'm here, and I'm so happy you're here. So understanding the doshas for me has allowed me to ditch the diet culture mentality completely, as I said earlier. I also find this to be really empowering. I can now live my life from a place of empowerment and understanding what I need. And that's really freeing to be able to ditch those, this really restrictive mentality, or to ditch this idea that I have to look to others for answers on what's good for me. Since living with the doshas and living Ayurvedically, my weight has completely stabilized. My skin issues have completely cleared up. My energy is balanced. And when it's not balanced, I'm able to look at it and understand why I'm so tired. And my moods have become much more balanced too. It really, pulls everything back into place as it should be. And now it's my mission to help and inspire all of you to get into this same place. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. So the 3 Ayurvedic doshas. So to get started, I want you guys to grab a piece of paper, if you haven't already, and jot down a few things. Because sometimes we learn about the doshas, and we're like, oh, I want to be that one. Oh, I want to be that one. And so then as we're assessing ourselves, we lean towards the one that we want to be rather than actually checking in with where we are right now. So before we jump into it, I want you to write down just quickly like how you would describe your physical body structure, and try to do this with no judgment. Just like literally, if someone was describing you, how would they describe? Are you tall? Are you short? Are you big boned? Are you really thin framed? Do you have thick hair? Do you have thin hair? Do you have a round face? Do you have a really angular face? Just kind of start to think about things like that. I'll give you a moment or two to jot that down. And then I want you to think about your digestion and your appetite. So do you have like a really voracious appetite? Could you eat all day, or do you forget to eat? Think about what's happening in your digestion. Is it regular? Do you deal with constipation? Do you deal with diarrhea? Do you deal with gas and bloating? Or do you feel like you just get the gold star? If so, you're lucky. And now here's a fun one. I want you to write down the 3 adjectives that your best friend would use to describe you. And then I want you to write down your mood on a good day and your mood on a bad day. And then once we have these, I just want you to have this, these notes that you wrote out about yourself down beside you, so that you can kind of, as we go through the doshas, start to look and notice now perhaps where you're falling. So we're starting to kind of figure out which columns you may fall in just with these simple questions. So the doshas are the 3 energy types that make up the world around us. I always tell this to my clients. Your dosha is your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. So when it's in balance, it's going to help you move forward in life. It's going to really help you follow your dharma, what you're here for. But when it's out of balance, it is going to be your biggest downfall. It is going to be, your cause of illness and perhaps, bad mood, digestive issues, things like that. So understanding your dosha is the key to balanced health and wellness. Once we understand our dosha, we can start to see our own body's warning signs so that imbalances don't start to progress to things like chronic illness. And remember, we are all a unique combination of the 3 doshas. doshas. Literally no two people have the same makeup. And this is something I think is really special about Ayurveda, is that it truly treats every single person as bio-individual. So even if I'm Vata Pitta and you're Vata Pitta, which will make sense in a minute, it doesn't mean that you're the same makeup with Vata Pitta as I am. They're all going to manifest and show up differently in each of our bodies. And that's where we do really start to get rid of this idea of fad diets and like, you know, what works for one person may work for the other sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't, because we really are very individual and the doshas are working differently in each of us. All right, so the doshas are made up of the 5 elements. The 5 elements are air, ether, which is space, fire, water, and earth. And then the 5 elements are made up of the 20 gunas or qualities. So Ayurveda is an Eastern medicine, and it's different than a Western medicine in that Western medicine is quantitative and Ayurveda is qualitative. So if you're talking to like a dietitian or a nutritionist who is trained in the Western medicine sphere, they'll talk to you about like grams of protein and serving sizes and gallons of water and numerical things, quantitative things. Ayurveda doesn't look at things from a quantitative place. We look at things from a qualitative place. So we're looking at the qualities of things. So I often have people ask me about serving sizes, and I say, I don't know, it depends. Because I'm not thinking about things quantitatively from an Ayurvedic perspective. I'm thinking about things qualitatively. So the qualities that we're looking at, and this is going to start to make sense as we get into the doshas, are rough and smooth. And their qualities are, they exist in everything, including ourselves, and they're opposites, right? So we have the 2 polarities, light and heavy, cold and hot, dry and oily, sharp and dull, dense and liquid, so moves and doesn't move basically, static and mobile, same, moves and doesn't move, but in a slightly different way, a slightly different quality, clear and cloudy. This is about like the transparency of things, and subtle and gross. So can you actually like literally physically touch it, or can you not touch it? And if you've dove into Ayurveda, you've likely heard these qualities get thrown around. And the more you get into this world, you'll hear things talked about in this way a lot. And at first it's a little confusing, and then it's intuitive, because we all, you know, from young age started to learn how to describe things. And so we're just re-remembering how to describe things and how to describe what's happening in our bodies. So in order to achieve health and wellness, we look to balance the gunas and the elements, which is going to help keep our doshas in balance, using the concept that like attracts like and opposites balance. So you add more heat to heat, you're going to get something hotter. You add cold to heat, it's going to become lukewarm. You add more cold, and it's going to continue to move on the spectrum towards cold. So when we start to talk about the doshas, we start to recognize the doshas in our body, we're just going to be looking to balance that and to keep our body in balance using the opposite qualities. So it's challenging at first because we haven't been, intuitive. We haven't been taught to think about our health in this way. But once you start to think about it, it's so intuitive, and it becomes quite easy. So when we talk about doshas, we're talking about 2 different things, and this often gets confused, and I think it's an important thing for us to remember. And I promise we will get into the 3 doshas soon. So prakriti is the state of your doshas when you were born. This is different for every single person. It depends on lots and lots of factors. So, and we can see it through things like our bone structure. Sometimes we can notice it through our mental tendencies. And this is where your body is healthy. So the goal of balance and wellness in Ayurveda is not to have the 3 doshas be equally balanced, because that will never happen unless you're tridoshic. The goal is for your body to be back in this prakriti, back in this state that you were born in, because that's where your body is healthy. And this is where we really get into that bio-individuality, is that my prakriti is different than your prakriti. So what is healthy and comfortable for my body is different than what's healthy and comfortable for your body. And I would just love for us all to really start to remember that. Vikriti is the current state of your doshas. And often when we're referring to Vikriti, we're referring to our state of imbalance because unfortunately, you know, we live in this crazy world, things are happening and they start to go off balance a little bit. And so sometimes when you take those online quizzes and it's a little confusing, it's like, it's not kind of resonates, but doesn't fully resonate. It's because you're answering the questions and the nuances aren't totally there of like, what's your Prakriti and what's your Vikriti. And so it kind of gets muddled. So when usually like when we're talking about the doshas today, when you hear it in conversation or in master classes or online, you know, we're probably talking about your Vikriti, like what your state of imbalance is, because that's what we need to start to bring back into balance. And again, if you're having any questions about this, we're going to do a Q&A at the end. So please jot down your questions and I'll answer all of them. And anyone watching the recording, just jot your questions down in the comment box and I will be sure to respond. All right, enough with the backstory. We're going to get into the doshas now. This stuff is fun. So Vata, the first dosha, Vata is made up of air and ether. So I showed this, you know, vast expanse landscape here, and even these things that are moved by the wind, and we can't see the movement of the wind, but when the windmills start going, if you've ever seen a windmill go, it's really kind of amazing. Like, wow, like there's so much power in that air and ether, even though it's subtle, right? And it's clear. So the qualities, when we're talking about Vata, the gunas that we're referring to are light, dry, mobile, subtle, and cold. So wind cools you off. It's not often you get like a really hot gust of wind, although it is possible, you know, generally it feels like cooler and more refreshing. So when we're working with this universal concept of like attracts like and opposites balance, then we're going to balance Vata with heavy, oily, dense, gross, and warm. Right. Let's see here. In the body, Vata is our nervous system. So it's super powerful, kind of like the wind, but we can't touch it, right? But we know that it's really affecting the way that we function. In the seasons, Vata is most predominant in the fall and winter. So that's when you're most likely to see Vata go off balance, is in the fall and the winter. That's also when we need to work a little bit harder to balance Vata. The time of life for Vata is old age. So different doshas govern different times of life, and you'll see more Vata tendencies pop up in the body in the old age, kind of like after retirement. You know, I think about like 70s, 80s, 90s, you really start to see the Vata pop up. So how to recognize a Vata body type, and this then when we're talking about the body type, we're talking more about Prakriti. We're talking about the way we were born and how our body is comfortable. I put this picture here of Audrey Hepburn because you can see she was she's very thin and slender. She does have quite a Vata body type here. So Vatas tend to be very short or very tall. And sometimes like you'll notice that you're shorter or taller than the rest of your family, you know, or like the rest of your community. They tend to have long limbs or kind of really thin, lanky limbs. And a darker complexion. And again, this is in relation to your family. So like if you have my complexion, but then, or the rest of your family has my complexion and you end up being like a bit darker, you know, that could be a Vata sign, or even tans really easily is a Vata too. Vatas generally have pretty thin hair. They also have really curly hair sometimes. So either thin or curly, sometimes both. And Vata will have more of a tendency towards being thin and underweight. So one of the struggles of a Vata could be to keep on weight. So I mentioned earlier that our doshas are our greatest strengths when we can harness them and understand them, and they can also be our greatest weaknesses. So we're going to first talk about our greatest strengths. So Vatas are creative and artistic. I always think of them as musicians and like the artists, you know, people who are really forging their own path, not necessarily following like the traditional 9-to-5 corporate trajectory. So I put this picture here, it's just a stock image that I found of a musician with lots of tattoos. You know, when I see someone that wears like lots of tattoos and has a really expressive, or in lots of jewelry and makeup and has like a very expressive, unique way of showing up in the world, I generally think there's probably a good bit of Vata there. Vatas are pretty outgoing. They're super fun to hang out with. You know, like we should all have a Vata in our social circle because they're going to make us do fun, cool things. They're pretty inspired. You know, it's like, oh, this is fun. This is fun. They love to travel and to have new experiences, and they can just kind of like, they're very free spirited, you know, so on a whim, they're flying to Argentina, you know, or wherever it is. They're opportunistic too, you know, like they see that moment to go and they go for it. Free-spirited, imaginative, out of balance. A Vata could deal with insomnia, anxiety, be very fearful, be very scattered and forgetful. So when I know my Vata is off of balance, I can't find anything. Like I'll literally be holding my AirPod case and freaking out and looking all around the house for the AirPod case, and then finally realize it's in my hand. And then I'm like, oh, Vata, that's Vata. In the body, you may see it as constipation, dry skin. So especially like on the hands and knuckles, maybe one of the first places that you see that start to pick up. Cold hands and feet too could be one. Gas and bloat and loss of appetite. Vatas forget to eat. So if you're a Vata, or if you forget to eat often, you know, then you may, or like, you know, at 6 o'clock, you're like, oh, I guess maybe I'm kind of hungry. That's a sign towards Vata for you. And then also loss of appetite too. You know, they may not have that strong hunger. So what causes Vata to go out of balance? What causes those out of balance characteristics to start to show up? Lack of routine is a really big one. Vatas have a hard time sticking to routine because they're so free-spirited, you know, and they're like up here and there. And when I tell Vatas to stick to a routine, they usually cringe. They're like, ooh, I don't want to do that. So if that's you, if you're like, oh, no, same thing every day, that sounds awful. You may be pointing a little towards Vata. Vata aggravating foods. So popcorn, it's the funniest thing. When I have like a super Vata client and this may be you, they often show up onto the calls eating popcorn. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's just such a Vata thing to do is to eat popcorn, but it's not necessarily the best food for you, unfortunately. Crackers, chips, raw food. So lots of those in your diet could be aggravating to Vata, especially in the digestion. Smaller winter weather, as I said earlier. And then excess travel, because travel is really Vata aggravating because it's so many changes and it really throws you out of your routine. And so while Vata really loves that, sometimes it can push us a little bit out of balance. And I say us because yes, I have a lot of Vata in me. So I am one too that doesn't love to stick to a routine. How to bring Vata into balance? The number one way, if you're like, this may be me, the number one way to bring Vata into balance is to establish and to stick to, there's the hard part, a routine. And it doesn't have to be a super regimented routine. If all you can do is wake up within the same hour, go to bed within the same hour, and eat 3 regular meals a day, that's it. So like 7 a.m. wake up time, set your alarm 7 days a week. 10 p.m. bedtime, set your alarm 7 days a week. You eat breakfast, you eat lunch, you eat dinner. That will really help Vata, that routine. And then of course, there's much more you can go into with the routine that's going to really start to settle your nervous system, but that's a really great place to start. Just simple, and it will work wonders. Foods for Vata, because I know we love to talk about food. So for Vata, we want to favor the sweet, sour, and salty tea. So again, Vata was pretty cold and dry and light, which we see in things like popcorn, crackers, but we also see it in like gas, bloating, and constipation, which then shows up, you know, it's a dryness that shows up in our digestion. So the sweet, sour, and the salty taste are going to have those opposite qualities. It's going to be a little bit more juicy and grounding and not so drying on the body. You want to favor warming spices because Vata is cold. So cinnamon, fresh ginger, and cumin are all going to warm you up and kind of boost your digestion just a bit without overly heating you up though. Sweet foods. So this does not mean that since you're a Vata, you can go eat candy all day. Naturally sweet foods, according to Ayurveda, would be meat, whole grains, fruits, ghee, root vegetables. So think about like how like carrots and sweet potatoes and parsnips are like naturally sweet, and beets, you know, they're yummy and sweet. Nuts and seeds. So I would favor those, not the processed sweet stuff. Sour foods, because sour is actually going to, what it does is it stimulates like secretion. So it actually increases, like if you put try putting lime or lemon in your mouth later on, and you'll notice that like the saliva increases in your mouth. And so that's kind of what happens with sourness. It just makes things a little bit juicier, and Vata has that tendency towards dryness. So lemons, limes, grapefruits, miso, kimchi, kraut. Again, all of these, you know, especially the sour fruits, the kimchi, kraut, you know, you want to have those in moderation, but that is going to be nice. Salty foods too. So salt, please don't be afraid of salt. Pink Himalayan salt is great. And then salt is going to help you retain water. So for someone who struggles with water retention, salt's not great, but that's not something that a Vata type would struggle with, and necessarily. And so just making sure you're putting a little bit of pink salt on your food. Seaweed such as dulse, nori, kelp, kombu are great. Furikake flakes is like one of my favorite Vata secrets. So you can get them at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. It's in a little shaker jar, and it's got like sesame seeds, and it's got, which is gonna sweet taste, the seeds, and it has a little bit of salt, and then it has little flakes of seaweed. And so it's just it's kind of like salt, and you just can sprinkle it on your thing. You know, if you have soups, you have veggie stir fries, rices, grains, whatever, just a little sprinkle of furikake flakes when it goes with the flavor profile is a really nice way to add some seaweed into your diet. So I love that. Other lifestyle tips for Vata. Emphasize staying grounded. So remember, Vata is air and ether, which is naturally ungrounded. And when we were talking about the signs of imbalance of Vata, it's kind of not being grounded. You know, that feeling of anxiety is not a grounded feeling. Not being able to, you know, find anything, being super scattered, that's quite ungrounded. So some really simple ways that Vatas can stay grounded: put your feet on the ground. Like, it's as simple as finding a patch of grass, going out barefoot every day if you can, and putting your feet on the earth. And just letting yourself ground into the earth. That's going to really balance that Vata dosha and ground you down back into your body. Practices too, like yoga nidra, a meditation that pulls you into your body, and perhaps like a yoga nidra with an eye pillow and a weighted blanket on your hips to kind of help sink you into the ground is going to help you feel quite grounded. Staying warm. So like I said, Vata is cold, and Vata will tend to towards cold. And it also gets more off balance in the fall and winter. So you're going to want to follow these guidelines more in the fall and winter. And so we just want to make sure that we don't get overly cold, because that will imbalance the Vata. Practicing oil massage, Abhyanga, is a really wonderful way to balance Vata. So in the fall and winter, I really, really hone in on oil massage. And if you know that you tend towards Vata and you tend towards drier skin, cold hands and feet, that would be a good practice. On my blog, I do have a Abhyanga 101 blog there that just describes exactly how to do Abhyanga. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about that. Save energy and get enough rest. So, you know, Vata can burn themselves out a little bit because they're constantly going, but they're not necessarily grounded. So just focusing on rest and saving energy, and knowing that you might not have as much energy as one if you're Vata. Don't overdo it with intense exercise. So HIIT classes, really intense spinning classes, running marathons, not necessarily, if you're very Vata, or if you're dealing with a Vata imbalance, that's not necessarily the type of exercise that's going to be perfect for you. Instead, think about more gentle ways of moving your body and more ways that are going to ground you. So hiking, yoga, swimming, Tai Chi, Qigong, you know, that really pull the energy down, all really amazing types of exercise for Vata. All right, moving on to Pitta. So now remember, we may have tendencies towards 1 or 2 or 3, but you don't have to be just one. So if you're like, ooh, I got a lot of Vata, that doesn't mean you don't also have a lot of Pitta or a lot of Kapha. So keep coming into them all with an open mind. This is just about, starting to learn our unique makeup. So Pitta is made up of fire and water. I put the picture of lava here because I always think about lava when I think about Pitta, because it's kind of like watery fire. So it's not like, when we think of the water of Pitta, it's not like this cool water that we would want to bathe in necessarily. The gunas, or the qualities that we're going to use when we start thinking about Pitta and we're describing Pitta, is hot, sharp, oily, mobile, light, and spreading, like the way that lava spreads. Balance it with cold, soft, dry, dense, heavy, and static. So just those opposite qualities. Pitta in the body is blood. And just think, blood is kind of like lava, right? It's this red, hot, penetrating stuff that moves. And so, in our blood, our hormones are in our blood. So hormones would be looked at as Pitta. Our immune system is in the blood. So that would also be looked at, as a Pitta quality too, or as it is Pitta. You don't need to get like so worried about that if this is an introduction to you. It's just kind of things as you further go down this road, those types of things will start to make sense. The seasons of where Pitta is the most out of balance would be summer, because it's so hot. So we're in Pitta season right now. So for pretty much everyone, unless you're living in the Southern Hemisphere, the recommendations that I'm going to give for Pitta, you would want to adopt right now, because our Pitta, wherever it is in our constitution, is probably more likely to go off balance right now because it's summer, because it's already so hot. We're adding like on like. The time of life that Pitta is the most, is the strongest in our constitution is going to be like our adulthood, so 20s to 60s, but that's ish. But it's when we're building a career, when we're building our, home, we're raising kids, we're doing very Pitta type of activities. Pitta may go a little bit more off balance, or it will just present more strongly in your constitution during this time. So how to recognize a Pitta body type? Pittas are super athletic, which is why I put this kettlebell thrower on here. I don't know the proper word because I've never done that. That's a Pitta type of activity right there. Usually a medium body type, so not like super tall or lanky, but not like super short or stocky. Freckles is a common Pitta characteristic. I am Vata Pitta, and I often get freckles, especially in the summer, which I never noticed the connection, but in the summer it is Pitta season, so it makes sense. They may have a fairer complexion too, or even like possibly like a little like paler, like and reddish, could be Pitta. And so they need to be careful in the sun. Pittas can sunburn. Light eyes. Pittas often have sensitive eyes too. So if you or someone who like has to have sunglasses on, that is quite a Pitta thing because they have sensitive eyes. Maybe like a heart face shape or an angular jaw. Like sometimes you see, especially it's really striking in men, like a very angular jaw would be a Pitta characteristic. And again, when we're talking about the body type, we're talking about your prakriti, the state you were born in, not necessarily the state of your current imbalance. But they're hints at where we want to bring our body to and where we want to watch out for too. So if we know we have all of these Pitta body types, then we need to watch out for Pitta imbalances because we're more likely to go off balance with Pitta. All right, so greatest strength characteristics. I put the president podium here because a president, being a president or a CEO, is a very Pitta type of job. I don't think that you could be a president, especially of like a country, and not be very, very Pitta. So really determined, really intelligent, really focused. Pittas are natural leaders. So they're often, CEOs and entrepreneurs and, people who are really leading thought movements. That's a very Pitta type of characteristic right there. Charismatic too. Often we're drawn to them unless it's off balance. Clarity of vision and determination with that vision, seeing that vision and moving towards it. Strong digestion. So Pittas can often eat anything. So, and it doesn't really bother them. And I noticed this too with my Pitta clients. It doesn't bother them until your body starts to go off balance. And so I hear this always, it's like, I used to be able to eat everything. I used to be able to eat everything. And that's a sign that perhaps you do have Pitta in your constitution, but things have gotten off balance a little bit. Pittas, also with that have a really strong appetite. So they can eat everything and they love to eat. As a Pitta, they never really lose my appetite. Even if I'm super sick, I'm still gonna eat. A Pitta out of balance would be angry, and big bursts of anger and judgmental. They also would tend towards jealousy or spitefulness, maybe even rage. Breakouts and rashes, you can see it on your skin. That would be a sign of too much Pitta, too much heat. Diarrhea would also be a sign in your digestion of Pitta starting to get off balance. Headaches could be another Pitta condition. Gas. Acid reflux could be Pitta. It's not always Pitta, but it could be. Hunger. So, like when you get so hungry that you're angry, and it's oftentimes with a Pitta, it's like a switch gets flipped. It's not like you've waited all day. Oh, I'm kind of hungry. I'm kind of grumpy. It's like all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm gonna, break down this building if I don't get food. That's Pitta. Also perfectionist. Pitta has that drive to do things and to do things well, which is your greatest strength. But then your greatest weakness would be when that turns into perfectionism. And then that can lead to burning the candle at both ends of the stick and kind of burning out. So what causes Pitta to go off balance? Overwork, kind of like I just said, that perfectionism and burning the candle at both ends of the stick, burning you out completely. Pitta aggravating foods. So I'm sorry to say, but caffeine and alcohol are both aggravating to Pittas. I often get a few groans with that. Spicy foods are also aggravating to Pitta. So if you love to put sriracha on everything, and you're noticing some of these Pitta characteristics, you may want to just start assessing that, evaluating that, and fried foods. And then, like I said, summer weather, because like attracts like, and so we're in a very hot Pitta time right now. That's going to increase Pitta in our bodies. How to bring Pitta into balance. The number one way to bring Pitta into balance is to bring more enjoyment and play into your life. Because again, Pittas are like the president types. And because there's so much determination, it can become very serious and, work. And that can lead to burnout. And then, when you work too much, you kind of get grumpy and angry and all of those, and then you reach for the caffeine and then you reach for the wine, and it kind of becomes this vicious Pitta cycle. So the more you can bring play, what just makes you giggle and have fun, that's going to really be supportive to your Pitta more than anything else. Foods for Pitta. For Pittas, we want to favor the sweet, bitter, and astringent tastes. We also want to favor cooling spices. So cilantro, cardamom, and fennel. And then cilantro is an herb. So the spice version of that would be coriander. So coriander and cilantro, all great. Cardamom, fennel, really amazing. Mint, for this time of the year, if you can throw mint or cilantro on everything you eat, you're going to be in better shape. Sweet foods, we already went over this with Vata, but again, it would be meat. You want to be cautious with meat for Pitta because meat can be heating, so in smaller doses. Whole grains, really good. Fruits. Right now we're in stone fruit season, so like the peach plums, apricots, pluots, all of those are so juicy and sweet, so great for Pitta. Ghee, root vegetables, again, the ones with the natural sweetness, like carrots, sweet potatoes, nuts and seeds. So bitter foods. Bitter is actually going to like dry things up, because remember, Pitta was like lava, so it's hot, but it's also kind of inflamed, And so bitter foods help to cool. Bitter is very cooling on the body, and it's going to dry things up a bit. So dandelion greens, Pick up your dandelion greens, please. If you're on my newsletter, I talk about them all the time. If you're on my Instagram, I talk about them all the time. They're not the most delicious green, but they're so bitter and they're gonna just be so wonderful for that pitta. Dandy blend, I have a few recipes using dandy blend on my website. It's a blend of dandelion root, beetroot, chicory root. So it's a coffee replacement, because remember, coffee not so great for pittas. It tastes like coffee, but it's actually gonna be bitter and really cooling and nourishing to your body. Turmeric and sesame seeds, also good. Astringent. So astringent foods are also drying and cooling. Beans. So beans are very naturally astringent, and I do recommend those for pittas or in pitta season. Pomegranates, also, like, pomegranate is a power food for pittas. So if you see some around, grab them. They're not so in season right now, so they're a little harder to find, like local, especially if you're in LA, but they're going to be astringent and really cooling to pitta. Apples are actually astringent too. So at the end of summer, early fall, when we need to cool off that extra pitta, it's no wonder that apples come into season. And if you have ever been in my cleanses, or if you want to do my fall cleanse in the fall, you'll see we use apples a lot in the fall to help bring our body into balance. Cabbage, Brussels sprouts, also some nice astringents. Those are also bitters as well. Other lifestyle tips for pitta. So focus on kindness, gratitude, and appreciation. Again, just kind of the opposite qualities of pitta off balance. Spend time surrounded by beauty. This was a hard one for me to wrap my head around when I first started learning Ayurveda, but pittas, because they can become so determined, we like narrow focused and forget to play and relax and find that enjoyment. So buy yourself flowers and look at the flowers. That can just invoke that sense of beauty, that sense of calm. Or spray yourself. This is a great one. Spray yourself with rose water spray, because rose invokes beauty. I can't imagine anyone like, oh, rose is ugly and upsets me. Like, it just invokes that beauty. Or perhaps watch the sunset and really admire and try to see the beauty in the sunset. All of that is going to cool that pitta intensity in the mind. Play and have more fun. Like I said, whatever it is, like, is it paddleboarding? Is it bike riding? Is it playing card games? Have a game night. Just play. Avoid exercising in the midday sun. You don't want to overheat your pitta. So especially in the summer, in the early morning or the late evening would be a better time to exercise, because you're less likely to overheat. And then for pittas can be very competitive and very driven, and they're strong and athletic. So it is okay to exercise and like really move and exert yourself. But I want you to notice, if you're very pitta, just make sure you're not overexerting yourself and aggravating that pitta. So moderate exercise, like swimming, hiking, biking, yoga is best, even jogging. A pitta doesn't need to take it as chill as a true Vata does, and they probably wouldn't, but maybe a hit here or there, but like hit every day, not necessarily the best thing for you, because it's going to really fire up that pitta. Or we even have like those rooms. I don't know if Orange Theory does it. I've never been, but there was some spin studio. I can't remember the name of it now, where they put everyone's metrics up on the wall and you can like see where you rank. That's not necessarily the best for pitta, because you're going to like constantly be competing with yourself and competing with others. You want to exercise and move your body, but not in a way that fires you up like that. All right, we're on to our last one, and then we'll do the questions. So Kapha, water and earth. So when I think of Kapha, I think of mud, like we see here. The qualities of Kapha are going to be wet, soft, dense, dull, slow, and cold. I kind of think of Eeyore when I think of Kapha, from Winnie the Pooh. So a little bit of that sometimes. Balance with hot, dry, light, and mobile. So again, just the opposite qualities is what we want to balance it with. In the body, we see Kapha as mucus. So again, the Vata was the nervous system, Pitta was the blood, Kapha is the mucus. And you don't have to worry about this too much if this is new to you. Kapha season is the spring. Where we often see a lot of like respiratory issues, like congestion, spring allergies. Those are all manifestations of kapha. We kind of see that. And the spring too, it's like cold and damp. It rains a lot. If you're on the East Coast, you have lots and lots of like cold ice and snow, which would be much more vata. And then it starts to melt and it makes things really muddy and sluggish. And that's all kapha. Time of life would be infancy and childhood. So kids are very kapha. They're in the kapha time of life, and we see kapha imbalances manifest a little more in kids. Like kids are often like snotty and mucusy, and they get sick quite easily, and they need to nap, they need more sleep. You know, those are all kapha qualities right there. How to recognize kapha body types. And for some reason, this did not show up very well, but this is Oprah Winfrey. I always think of Oprah as like just an amazing kapha. You know, she's like beautiful and out there and nurturing, and she's got that thick, lustrous hair. So kaphas are generally curvy bodies, large frames with big bones. Sometimes they have a very porcelain, like complexion, almost like those porcelain dolls with, you know, just like rosy cheeks, thick, lustrous hair. So like thick hair, thick nails, big pearly white teeth, you know, really big, beautiful eyes. Those would be very kapha characteristics. Sometimes, oh, I put angular jawline in here, but that's not correct. It would be more of a round face, and long eyelashes, you know, like their hair is very strong and beautiful, and maybe even like thick eyebrows. And then your greatest strength characteristics. I put a bear hug here because people, or I put a kid hugging a bear because they're in the kapha time life, but I think of bear hugs when I think of kapha. You know, who's someone who just like wrap their arms around you and it's just like the best hug you've ever gotten. They're probably kapha. So I always think about like good huggers are kaphas. Kaphas are really nurturing. They're really loving. You know, think kind of like the school teacher type of persona would very much be a kapha. They're patient, you know, so again, school teacher. Gentle, they're very peaceful, reliable. Your kapha friend is the one that's always going to answer the phone for you and is always going to listen. You know, we all, like kaphas are, I'm not very kapha, and I really admire kaphas, and I want everyone to have a kapha friend, kaphas in their life, because it's so nice, especially if you're very vata and you're a little all over the place, to have someone that's reliable like that is wonderful. And to be reliable like that for people is amazing. They're content. Kaphas are also great with money, good with savings, you know, just like very like mindful about their actions. And they don't necessarily do things on a whim. Now, when kapha goes off balance, though, it can become lazy and unmotivated and stagnant, you know, so they don't do things on a whim, but then when they're off balance, maybe they don't do anything. Like they're just very resistant to change. In the body, we see it as weight gain, and generally like an unhealthy amount of weight gain is when we would know that kapha was at play. They can get stuck, you know, so very resistant to change, but they can get stuck in emotions. You can get stuck in the past, you know, like never being able to really move forward. You know, everyone's like, you got this. And it just holding on to the past too much would be a kapha characteristic. Constipation in the body, and like a really heavy feeling in your stomach, like heaviness after the meals could be kapha. Mucus problems too. So if you've got mucus congestion in the lungs, or you wake up with a runny nose, all of that could be signs of kapha imbalance as well. What causes kapha to go out of balance? Kapha aggravating foods. So too much of those: sweets, cheese, baked goods, ice cream, you know, kind of like sticky, mucusy things. You know, I think about that, like when ice cream melts, it's kind of like that. And that's all going to increase kapha in the body. Lack of exercise and movement. Oversleeping or sleeping at the wrong time. So kapha, that heaviness. And again, like attracts like. So sleeping is a heavy activity, which is why it's great for vata, and everyone has to sleep. But a kapha, because they already have that innate heaviness, may tend towards sleeping a lot. And spring weather, like we mentioned. The number one way to bring kapha into balance is to get moving with vigorous exercise. So kapha needs to get a little sweaty. They need to push themselves. They need to move that stagnancy, because it's going to physically move the stagnancy and the mucus and the extra weight out of the body. But think about too, like once you've gone for a really nice long run, and then all of a sudden you feel clear-headed, you know, and you feel like, okay, I know what to do. I'm ready to move forward. I feel so much more energized. The kapha out of balance in the head could feel really unmotivated, could feel quite cloudy, you know, so the movement can be helpful both physically and mentally. Foods for kapha. So kapha would favor the pungent, so spicy, bitter, and astringent taste. They also want to favor warming spices like cumin, cinnamon, and ginger powder. Ginger powder is going to be quite pungent, quite sharp. And so that's why I put that over the fresh ginger, but fresh ginger is fine too for kaphas. So pungent foods that are naturally spicy: chili peppers, mustard greens, spinach. Spinach actually is pungent, and radishes. So we see like things like mustard greens and radishes, and leeks, that would be pungent too. And onions, all of those pungent, they're in season in the spring when we need to favor a little bit more kapha balancing food, because we're all going to tend towards a little more kapha imbalance because of the weather. Bitter foods: dandelion greens, we talked about these, dandy blend, turmeric, sesame seeds, and then astringent. So again, beans, pomegranate, apple, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. You'll notice here, so kaphas, the first two, we favor the sweet taste. We don't favor the sweet taste as much for kaphas. So the protein of choice would be beans for kapha. And, you know, a kapha type can do pretty well, probably, on a vegetarian diet, where the other two might struggle a little bit more with that. I mean, again, there's lots of nuances here. So, you know, if you want more support, it's nice to work one-on-one with people, because these are kind of general recommendations, but they start to give you a guideline for how to look at yourself. Other lifestyle tips for kapha: wake up before 7 a.m. and exercise first thing in the morning, just so you kind of already start your day with that opposite, because opposites balance. So we want to just move that stagnancy, because sleeping is a stagnant activity. And so we want to move through that stagnation first thing in the morning so that it doesn't build up throughout the day. Avoid heavy meals after sundown. Seek coaching, support, and accountability groups. You know, I recommend this for everyone, of course, but kaphas really need that accountability. They need that support. They need that motivation and someone to check in on them. 30-day challenges, things like that. That would work well for a kapha if they can get in it. Because once they get in it, they do have great stamina and you can stay in it. It's just about doing it. Avoid napping unless you're sick. So we talked about this too, you know, how not to oversleep. A kapha probably loves a nap, but doesn't necessarily benefit from that midday nap because it adds some more heaviness. Incorporate dry brushing and neti pot into your morning routine. Neti if you have congestion, especially, because this moves the mucus out and it moves any type of stagnation. It gets things flowing. And when things are moving in the body, it's going to also help things move in the mind. Vigorous exercise is great for kapha. They're the ones who are probably the least likely to go to that spin class that has like the rankings on the wall, but they're the ones who would benefit from it the most. So if you are a kapha, really do push yourself exercising a little bit, get yourself moving, and try to stick to that type of routine. So remember, you have all three doshas present in you. You aren't just one. Sometimes like we take a quiz or someone tells us we're Vata and then we get stuck in that box and then we stop looking at all of the other things, and we stop looking at the factors that may be influencing where we are right now. None of these rules are hard and fast. You know, we figure out which ones and which combinations of the rules and the guidelines work best for us. And we know that it's always fluctuating throughout the seasons and throughout your life. So learning Ayurveda is really learning how to start to look at yourself and start to respond to what's happening in your body. So take a moment, you know, and look back at that first notebook, that first sheet of notes that we took, where we wrote down what your best friend would describe about you, how you are on a good day, how you are on a bad day, and just, you know, notice which ones are correlating with the doshas, where they might be strongest for you in your body. And then really think about if there's anything you can adjust in your daily routine to keep these doshas in balance. So I'm here to support you. If this was like, ooh, it like lit a bulb in your head and you're like, I need to dig into this a little bit more. This is what I do with people. So I offer one-on-one coaching. I absolutely love helping you start to understand what's happening in your body and how to respond to it through diet and through lifestyle, through your daily routines. Seasonal cleansing is also an amazing way to keep your doshas in balance. I recommend seasonal cleansing every spring, every fall. I personally offer 3 group cleanses throughout the year. I have one starting September 20th, I believe is the start date. It is the start date, September 20th. And then I have one again in the fall, and I'll have one in January. The September 20th one, we really work on clearing out excess Pitta dosha and bringing our body into balance as we go into the Vata season so that we can stay balanced. If you're interested in that, the registration is already open for that. I will send out a follow-up email where you do have a link to register. And if you use the code early bird, it will last through August, and it brings the price of the course down to $99. So I'll make sure to email all of that out, but please do reach out to me if you want any one-on-one support as you keep working through, how to respond to your body and perhaps what your doshas are and what your body needs. And with that, I tried to put a picture on this last page, but I was having so many silly problems. I really think Mercury is in retrograde. But thank you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for being here. I know we all have really busy lives, and it's a crazy world out there. So I appreciate you all for being here.